Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are on chapter 25, verse 2. We're on the Kli Yakar on Pasuk Beis. He's talking about, it's about 10 or 15 lines in. We're beginning with the phrase, he's talking about what the idea is behind Shemitah. He cited a few concepts. He spoke about the position of the Rambam, that this is an agricultural strategy to rest the land once every 7 years, so to be in better position to produce. He spoke about the Akedah, that it's a way of remembering that God created the world. And he pointed out different difficulties with both of these pshatim. So now he says, so in order to resolve various questions on the language in these psukim, Omer Ani, I would say, Shetam mitzvah, the reasoning behind this mitzvah, Yisrael b'midas ve'emunah v'abitachon b'Hashem. The goal is to root the Jewish people with the character trait of faith in God. God was very concerned that once they entered the land of Israel, they would be involved in working the land. They're not eating God's mun anymore in the desert. They'll work the land as is normal within the realm of nature. And when they find themselves to be able and successful in the land, they'll forget God. When their faith will be removed from him. And they will think, they'll think that it's their great ability that brought the success. They'll think that people, this is just the way of the world. They'll think the land is theirs. They're in charge. It's their land. And there's no force other than them in this world. That's what we're concerned about. Therefore, to help combat that outlook, God takes them utterly, totally out of the normal realm of nature. I am going to have to take the Kli Yakar's word on this one, but he says it's very normal in agricultural settings to plant for 2 years and let the land rest for 1 year. God says, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to plant the land for 6 years straight, each year. And I'm telling you, because remember, by the way, come the 7th year, they can't work the land, which means that the 6th year has to generate a lot in order to cover the difference. So God says, work the land 6 years in a row, plant the land 6 years in a row, and your non-Jewish neighbors or other people are telling you, oh my gosh, you've got to rest the land every 3 years. You know what? You're going to work the land 6 years in a row, and it's going to do a bumper crop in year 6. Excuse me, I just said out what he said. Excuse me. So skip a few lines. So not only is it going to be okay in year 6, it's going to be great in year 6. And that's a miracle from God. So that acts as a built-in reminder already that it's not them that's making them successful in the land, it's God. Gosh, if that year 6 is impressive, we say that crop from the 6th year will cover them for 3 years, really. Okay. Skipping a few lines. Because of this, your eyes will be raised to God. The goal is that the same way that the Jewish people looked to God in the desert for the man, so too the Jewish people should look to God in the land of Israel for their agricultural success. Kach in Hashmita, Shlo Yavdu Adam Kol Shana Shvius In Zeravi and Katzir v'Yisbuchwal and they'll just rely on miracles in year 7. V'zetam nachon ubaru Yosef b'kol masha dibru b'mfarshim. The Kli Yakar says, I think this makes a lot more sense than the other pshat that we said. Ulefi zeh dinhu sheyischayvu galus b'avan hashmita. Now the Kli Yakar says, now we certainly understand why there's a concept, why there's a correlation between a lax approach to Shemitah and being exiled from the land of Israel. The normal way you understand it is, hey, God gave you rules with this land. You don't keep the rules. You don't stay in the land. But the Kli Yakar says it makes all the more sense now. Mitzad chisaron hoem una shabahem. Because if the whole idea of Shemitah is to strengthen the faith in God, if they don't keep Shemitah, they're lacking in that. Kilo minu b'Hashem, they wouldn't be displaying faith in God. V'lo batchu b'yeshuaso. By not observing the Shemitah, they're not having faith in him. So, okay, so look, I had you in the land of the desert all these years, and then I brought you into the land of Israel, and the whole pshat of being in the land of Israel was supposed to be that you can bring the faith lessons that you internalized from the desert into the land of Israel, though that's difficult. And now I give you a mitzvah to help you with those faith lessons, and you reject the mitzvah? So you have to leave. So that's the Kli Yakar's idea. It's worth thinking about. Okay. Let's move on to verse 20. Let's move on to verse 20. V'chi somru, and if you say, Manochal b'shana hashviyis, this really fits into what we were speaking about a moment ago. And if you say, what will we eat in that 7th year? Hein lo nizra v'lo nasofis t'vosenu. We're not allowed to plant. We're not allowed to gather our grain. So God says, verse 21, this is what we were just talking about. I'll bring my blessings for you in the 6th year. And it will generate the grain for the 3 years. Okay. Technical question. When are people expressing this concern? And what exactly are they saying? What do you mean? What are we going to eat in the 7th year? Normally, in an agricultural setting, you're benefiting from the previous year, right? So it's not such a good question. What are we going to eat in the 7th year? The far better question is, what are we going to eat in the 8th year? That would be a better question to ask, because you were able to do everything normal in the 6th year. There's plenty of stuff that you have going into the 7th year. It's just a sort of a technical point, but just a very famous point here is Ramban on Pasuk Chaf. Kimo Mesuras. The Ramban says you have to sort of invert some of the phrasing here, meaning V'chi tomru b'shana hashviyis manochal. The Ramban says the way to read the pasuk is, when you say to yourself in the 7th year, what will we eat? Not when you say what we eat in the 7th year. Rather, when you say to yourself in the 7th year, how can we not plant the land? What are we going to eat down the road? Ki hadaga lahem bavur ashminis. The real worry wasn't for the 7th year. The real worry was for the 8th year. Kevan shetzchila shnas hashmita vayovel mitishrei mipeiros hashishis yochlu b'shvius. Since the Shemitah year and the Yovel began from Tishrei, so they'll be fine in the 7th year. They'll eat the fruit of the 6th year. Committing b'chol hashanim lechol ad achrei hakatesh u'b'chag hashavuos v'yagam achrei keina close malachas atfur l'zaros elohaver v'yalkein anachim b'peirosh v'yasas esatfur l'shlosh hashanim b'avur shnas hayovel shetase hashishis l'chol shnas hashmita v'yovel v'ashan she'achrei hayovel kulam yashan yochlu. It's very interesting. The Ramban says what it means 3 years is actually the 6th year will cover the next 3 years, which actually means, because the Ramban is a problem. If you understand that the 6th year naturally covers the 7th year, so you can't say that the 6th year is going to cover years 6, 7, and 8, because the whole point is the crop from 1 year covers the next year. So it should be the 6th year will cover years 7 and 8. So why does it say 3 years? So Ramban says the pshat in 3 years is when the Jubilee year comes, because the Jubilee year follows the Shemitah year. So you have 2 consecutive years that you can't work the land. So in that circumstance, year 6 is going to provide so much that it'll cover year 7, 8, and 9, and only the first year you can work is 9. So that's just interesting chapter. Ramban goes on. So the pasuk is assuring us that when you're concerned in the Shemitah year, oy vey, what are we going to eat? Says God, Ani atzaves birchasi b'shana hashishis shetase atfur l'shlosh hashanim haboyim achreihem. God says, I'll see to it in the 6th year, there'll be a great crop that will cover you for years to come. So the Ramban is saying the pshat of the pasuk is, when you say in year 7, we've got to plant, because what are we going to eat in year 8? Don't worry, says the Ramban. Okay, that's a famous thing. Let's jump ahead now to verse 29. Really a totally different topic. Verse 29. The ish ki imkor beis moshav yir choma. A person who sells a residence in a walled city, he's able to redeem it for a full year. He has the ability to redeem it for a year. It's a fascinating halacha. This halacha is specifically in the land of Israel. We have to appreciate, we move from this house to that house, this community to that community, we move around. Tribes were given land in Israel. And I mean, this was like a gift from God to the tribes and the families within the tribes. So it was a big deal to sell land in Israel. And there's a fascinating halacha. If a person sells a Torah halacha, if a person sells a house in a walled city, we'll talk about probably tomorrow what the significance of the walled city. A person sells a house, they have a full year to buy it back from the purchaser. And the purchaser is compelled to let them buy it back. The underlying assumption is that the only reason a person would sell a property in Israel is because they have a money issue and they have a cash flow problem. So within that first year, if they can generate the funds to make themselves whole again, if they want to buy it back, they're allowed to buy it back. But then verse 30, if they don't buy it back until the completion of a full year, if they don't redeem it for that year, then it's gone. Then not only do they not have a right to insist that the purchaser let them buy it back at a later point, they don't have a right to insist it. But when the Jubilee year comes, there's an idea that when the Jubilee year comes, lands go back to original owners, not this house. Now, this is not only an interesting halacha, but it's unique from another halacha, because the previous psukim spoke about just the general circumstance when a person sells a property in the land of Israel, that they always have the right to buy it back. They always have the right to buy it back. And if they never buy it back, then when the Jubilee year comes, the family gets it back. So these are interesting halachos, but also the difference between a residential house in a walled city being so different from the field, that we'll have to get to tomorrow, God willing. So we discussed the Kliyakar regarding an idea behind Shmita. We discussed the Ramban regarding the context for what exactly is the concern of what are we going to eat? When is that concern being expressed?